Welcome, dear brave listener. You're tuning in to Careful TV, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're tuning in during the day or late at night, thank you for choosing to spend a part of your time with me. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. I still think about that year more than I like to admit. Sometimes it just slips in while I'm washing dishes or folding laundry, and before I know it, I'm back there, in that cramped little house with the peeling blue paint and the thin fence that separated our yard from theirs. It was my second year in college when it happened. My name's Emily, by the way. I'd spent freshman year in a noisy dorm, sharing a bathroom with 12 other girls, and by the time summer rolled around, I was desperate for more space. So when two friends suggested we rent a small off-campus house together, I jumped at it. It wasn't perfect. Old hardwood floors that creaked like crazy, weirdly small kitchen, but it had a backyard. My room was on the first floor, tucked in the back. The window overlooked that tiny yard, maybe 20 feet across, enclosed by a leaning wooden fence. One side of the fence had a gate that opened to the alley where we kept the trash bins. The gate was warped and old, the kind that didn't quite latch unless you looped a bungee cord across it. I used that gate a lot because I smoked, and it was easier than walking for the front door and around the block. The neighbors to our right were unusual. For men, maybe late 20s or early 30s, though they acted both younger and older at the same time. They never seemed to have jobs. You were always awake at odd hours, music playing, sometimes yelling. The first time I met one of them was during a police call to their place. It was late afternoon, and I'd heard shouting and crashing through my open window. My roommates and I stepped outside and saw flashing lights down the driveway. One guy, tall, thin, with a faded baseball cap, was standing in the yard, swaying slightly. He had bruises along his arm, and his shirt looked like it had been yanked half off. Another man was being cuffed and loaded into a squad car, while two other officers ducked into the house. The man in the cap noticed us watching and shuffled over. "You got any water?" he asked, his voice oddly calm. I fetched a bottle and handed it to him, but he just kept talking, rambling about how his roommate had flicked out over nothing, how the cops always exaggerated. He laughed at weird moments, like it was all a joke. I remember him leaning too close, the smell of smoke clinging to him, asking my name twice like he couldn't remember. After that, I avoided eye contact when I passed their house. Sometimes I'd see him out front, just standing there with his hands in his pockets, watching cars go by. About a month later, I was walking back from the corner store when I heard someone call out, "Hey, Emily." I turned and saw him leaning against a fence post. My chest tightened instantly. I gave a polite nod and kept walking, but he pushed off the post and matched my pace. "You never talk to me anymore," he said, like we'd ever been friends. I mumbled something about being busy, but he just grinned. "That's cool. I'll wait at your place, then we can catch up." I laughed awkwardly, hoping he was joking, but when I rounded the corner to my street, there he was, sitting on our front step with another guy I didn't recognize. They didn't move when they saw me. I froze halfway down the block, then turned and walked back toward the store, my pulse pounding. I called one of my roommates, begging him to come home, but no one was there. I ended up waiting on a bench for nearly an hour until I was sure they'd left. After that, I stayed inside as much as I could. If I had to go up back to smoke, I'd check the gate first. Still, little things started to feel off. Twice I found the bungee cord unhooked. Once, the gate was standing wide open. I convinced myself it was my roommates being careless. The yelling from next door never really stopped. Sometimes it would go on until 3 in the morning, waking me from a dead sleep. But the night it all came to a head was different. My boyfriend, Ryan, was staying over. He's the type who could sleep through a hurricane, But that night, he shook me awake just after 2 a.m. He whispered, "Someone's in the yard." At first I didn't process it, but then I heard it, a faint metallic clink like the gate latch being jostled. Then a low voice, muffled, followed by the sharp slam of the gate hitting the fence. Footsteps crunched across the patchy grass until they stopped just outside my window. The window was open. It always was because my room overheated at night. My heart thudded so hard I felt in my fingertips. The curtains swayed slightly in the warm air. Ryan and I stayed frozen, barely breathing. Then came the slow rattle of the doorknob to the back door, the one that led into the kitchen. It wasn't locked. We kept it bolted from the inside, but I couldn't remember if I'd slid the bolt that night. I could picture in my head. Thin wooden frame, worn lock, easy to kick in. The rattling stopped. A moment later, my window creaked, the sash lifting just an inch more. A voice muttered something I didn't understand. Low, clipped syllables, and then fingers curled over the edge of the frame. That was it. Ryan grabbed my arm, and we scrambled for our shoes, yanking them on as quietly as we could. I snatched my phone from the nightstand, and we slipped out into the hallway, then bolted for the front door. The street was dead quiet, but my hand shook so badly, I nearly dropped my phone as I dialed 911. My voice cracked when I gave the address. The dispatcher told us to stay outside and wait for officers. They arrived in less than 5 minutes. 2 cruisers sliding to a stop, headlights flooding the front of our house. The officers went straight into the backyard. Minutes later, they emerged with one of the neighbors, hands cuffed behind him. Another officer chased someone down the alley and brought him back a few minutes later. When the cops pulled us aside, they'd found a large kitchen knife tucked into the waistband of one of the men. The other had been carrying a folded piece of metal pipe. They'd both been high meth, heroin, and God knows what else. The cop didn't get details, but the phrase he used, intent to harm, made my stomach drop. I don't know what they wanted that night. I never said more than a few words to them, never gave them a reason to fixate on me. That's maybe what's worst, the not knowing. One of the men got 2 years in prison. The other was out within months. I didn't stick around to see if he came back. By spring, I'd broken my lease and moved back in with my parents. It's been over a year now, and I still can't sleep through the night. Every creak in the floorboards, every car door outside makes my chest seize up. Sometimes Ryan and I talk about that night, and he always says the same thing. That waking up when he did was pure luck. I don't disagree, because if he hadn't, I really don't know how this story would have ended. We've been in this apartment long enough to know most of the people on our floor by sight, even if we've never had more than a quick exchange in the hallway. The building's not huge. One of those older mid-rises from the 70s, with faded red brick out front and railings that have been repainted so many times you can see the layers underneath. Inside, the carpet has been patched in sections over the years, so the patterns don't quite match from one end of the hallway to the other. A little threadbare in spots, but functional. We're wedged between a strip mall and a line of narrow townhouses, so depending on the time of day you'll hear either the whoosh of cars breaking into the parking lot or the rhythmic hiss of automatic sprinklers hitting asphalt. It's not fancy, but it's steady. After a while, you start to know the building's rhythms. When a mail gets dropped off, which pipes bang in the winter, the exact moment on Sunday mornings when someone down the hall starts frying bacon. Most of the floor is a quiet mix of people. Across from us is an older couple, Ellen and Mark, who tape seasonal wreaths to their door, clovers in March, a big filled turkey in November. The guy 2 doors down works nights and wears the same black hoodie every time we see him in the elevator. He gives a tired nod and doesn't say much. There's a handful of others we recognize mostly by sound. The young woman who FaceTimes in Spanish with her family. The guy whose sneakers squeak as he walks to the stairwell. About 3 months ago, a new tenant moved into the apartment right next to ours. It had been empty for a while. The last resident, An older man who smoked on the balcony year-round moved out suddenly last winter. I noticed the moving truck one Saturday morning and a couple of cardboard boxes sitting in hallway. I figured we'd be hearing the usual thumps and scrapes of furniture for a few days, but after that morning, it was like she disappeared. I'd see the door shut, hear the faint click of a lock once in a while, but never really caught a proper glimpse of her. Maybe a quick shuffle down the hall, hair tied back, eyes down, no hi, no smile. Not rude, exactly, just accent. The kind of neighbor you could forget lived next to you. I'm Daniel, by the way. I live here with my girlfriend, Sam. We're not the welcome wagon type, but we're not cold either. We like our space. Most nights you'll find us on the couch, poking fun at a bad movie, or flipping between shows until we land on something we've already seen 3 times. We laugh, but we're mindful. No shouting matches. No music shaking the walls. We're as quiet as 2 people can be without whispering. That's why the first real encounter we had with her, the first time she looked right at us, stuck with me. It was a Thursday night, a little after 10. We'd run out of snacks during a movie and decided to hit the vending machine in the lobby. The hallway was dim, lit by the overhead fixtures that make everything look slightly yellow. When we stepped out, she was already there, standing at the elevator. The button was lit. She had her arms loosely crossed, eyes on the closed doors, still as a statue. We gave her the small, polite smile you give someone you vaguely recognize. She looked up, and in the space of a second, everything in her face changed. Her mouth tightened, her eyes went wide, and her whole posture pulled in on itself, shoulders drawn up like she was bracing for something to hit her. There wasn't even that half second of, "Oh, I think I know you" recognition. It was all startle, pure and sharp. Then she moved, not a shuffle or a step back. She turned and walked fast toward the far end of the hall, heels clicking on the concrete under the carpet. She stopped in front of a random apartment door and stood there stiffly, facing it but not knocking, not reaching for keys. The elevator arrived with a chime. Sam and I stepped inside without speaking, but I couldn't help glancing back in the narrow strip of glass in the door. She was still standing there, rigid, her eyes fixed on some point well past us. As soon as the door slid shut, Sam said, "Okay, that was weird. Maybe she just didn't want to ride with us," I said, but the words felt flimsy even as I said them. We tried to brush it off. People have bad days. Maybe she was avoiding everyone, not just us. But the next week, it happened again. I was heading out in the early afternoon. I had my keys in one hand, my phone in the other. Just as I turned to lock the door, hers opened. She stepped out with a laundry bag over her shoulder, caught sight of me, and froze. It wasn't subtle. Her whole body went still, eyes locking on mine. The look was almost identical to the one in the hallway that night. Wide-eyed, muscles tense. But this time there was no hesitation before she reacted. She spun on her heel, darted back inside, and slammed the door so hard I felt it through my feet. I stood there for a moment, trying to process it. Then I heard movement at the end of the hall. Through the laundry room's small window, I saw her, moving quickly from one machine to another, tossing clothes in with jerky, rushed movements. She kept glancing toward the door, scanning. When I walked past to get to the stairs, she froze. Her hands gripped the laundry bag tighter. Then she hoisted it over her shoulder, still full, and bolted past me into her apartment without saying a word. That stuck with me longer. Avoiding a shared elevator is one thing. Abandoning what you're doing just to get away from someone, that's different. That night I told Sam. She looked like she was scared of me. I said. Sam frowned. "Scared? Are you sure?" "Yeah. Like, actually scared. Twice now." "Do you think she's, I don't know, going through something?" "Maybe. Or maybe she thinks we've done something to her." "Daniel, we've barely even seen her. How did she think that?" I didn't have an answer. Still, it changed something. Now I find myself listening for the sound of her door before stepping into the hall. I check the peephole without really meaning to. It's not that I'm afraid of her. More that I don't want to trigger whatever reaction this is. And then last night, it happened a third time. I was taking out the trash a little after 8. The hallway was quiet. That muffled silence that comes after dinner when most people have settled in. I turned toward the elevator just as her door opened a crack. She stepped out enough to see me. Her eyes widened. The trash bag in her hand slipped slightly, like she'd forgotten she was holding it. Then she stepped backward in her apartment and closed the door, not slamming it this time. Just a quiet, final click. I froze. For a second I considered knocking, asking if we'd done something to upset her. Maybe I could explain, though I wasn't sure what I'd be explaining. But something about the tightness in my chest told me that would only make it worse. I dropped my trash down the chute. When I came back, her door was still closed. No sound from inside. Later, Sam suggested maybe we should try saying hello if we run into her again, to break whatever this pattern is. And maybe she's right. But I keep circling back to the same thought. Fear like that doesn't usually come from nowhere. People don't look at strangers that way unless they believe they have a reason. And I have no idea what hers is. The night of July 14th, 1992, started like most summer nights in Maple Glen. Thick air clinging to the skin, a faint hum from the cicadas in the oak trees, and the occasional flicker of lightning far off over the hills. It wasn't a place where much happened. We were a Tulane town with a diner, a post office, and not much else to fill the weekly paper. People didn't lock their doors here. Not really. You just trusted that the world ended at the edge of town, and whatever was beyond it kept moving past. Maple Glen Avenue cut through the center of our neighborhood. The houses on it weren't new, but they were steady, narrow driveways, chain-link fences, porches with sagging steps that had been patched and painted more than once. You knew every mailbox by sight. If someone got a new car, people noticed. If someone painted their shutters, we talked about it at the grocery store. I'm Daniel, by the way. I've lived here most of my life, except for a few years in my 20s when I thought I'd try somewhere bigger. But I came back. Most of us who grew up here do, eventually. My place sits 3 houses down from where Frank and Laura Dean lived. Frank was 61, all quiet politeness and tired eyes. He'd done 30 years at the paper mill before it shut down. Laura was 59, sharp in the way that could catch you off guard. The kind of person who remembered your birthday, even if you'd only mentioned it once. They didn't have kids, but they had each other, and that was enough. Every spring they planted rows of tomatoes in the backyard, and every summer they brought over jars of sauce they'd made from them. That Tuesday night, just after 10:30, I was sitting in my kitchen with the window open, reading with the radio low in the background. That's when I heard it. A pair of muffled cracks. Not loud enough to echo, not quite fireworks. My first thought was that it came from the other side of the creek, where kids sometimes shot off bottle rockets when the weather was dry. I almost stood to check, but then the sound was gone, swallowed up by the hum of the night. 2 houses over, my neighbor Carla was taking her dog out before bed. She'd later tell me she saw a dark green station wagon idling at the curb outside the Dean's place. It wasn't a car she recognized, but then again, people sometimes had relatives visiting. She noticed the brake lights flare as it pulled away, not fast, just steady, and turned down the hill toward Route 8. The next morning, I saw Carla standing by her mailbox, staring toward the Dean's house. "Their Buick's not in the driveway," she said as I walked by. "And the front door is open, wide open." We crossed the street together. The porch creaked under our weight, the kind of sound that should have brought Laura to the door with a quick smile and a wave. But the only movement came from the curtain in the living room window, shifting just enough to show the door standing ajar. Carla called out first. "Laura? Frank? You home?" Nothing. The air inside was cooler, like the AC had been running all night. I stepped just inside, not far, just enough to see the kitchen from the hall. 2 coffee mugs sat on the table. One still had a faint ring of cream at the bottom. The chairs were pushed back like someone had stood up in a hurry. I think I knew, even before I saw them. They were on the floor between the counter and the pantry, side by side, their hands bound in front of them. There was no movement, no sound. Carla's breath caught, sharp and quick, and then she was pulling me back toward the door, muttering, "We need to call someone." Now, by the time the first police car rolled up, a few of the neighbors had drifted to their porches, drawn by the sound of sirens. 2 more cars followed, then an ambulance, though it didn't leave with any rush. Yellow tape went up around the yard, looped from the mailbox to the back fence. Officers moved in and out, their radios breaking the stillness with short bursts of chatter. Word travels fast here. Within an hour, everyone knew Frank and Laura were gone. The official line from the sheriff's office was that they'd been restrained and fatally injured during a home invasion. They didn't say much else, but that was enough. The details came in pieces, some from the paper, some from people who claimed they knew someone on the force. The Deans had been tied up, likely the night before. The intruder hadn't ransacked the place. Nothing was smashed, and the drawers in the bedroom were untouched. The only things missing were Frank's shortwave radios, a small wooden box Laura kept in the kitchen, and the Buick from the driveway. It didn't add up. If it was just a robbery, why leave everything else? Why take the time to buy them? Why not grab what you couldn't run? Detectives went door to door for days. They asked if we'd seen the green station wagon. They asked if we'd noticed anyone unfamiliar in the area that week. They even asked about people from Frank's old job at the mill, as if some grudge might have been sitting there all this time, waiting for a chance. One theory floating around was that someone had targeted Frank specifically for the radios. He'd been in amateur radio for decades, met all sorts of people over the airwaves. Maybe he'd arranged to sell one, and the deal had gone bad. Or maybe someone knew exactly what equipment he had and thought it was worth stealing. But still, it didn't explain the violence. Weeks passed, then months. The Buick never turned up. The radios never surfaced at pawn shops. The green station wagon became something we watched for, even though by then it could have been anywhere. The Dean's house sat empty for almost a year. The grass grew tall. The tomato beds went to weeds. People stopped walking their dogs on that side of the street after dark. Carla told me she started locking her doors during the day, something she'd never done in her life. When a young couple finally bought the place, they painted the siding a soft yellow, tore out the chain link fence, and planted a lilac bush in the front yard. They smiled and waved when they moved in, but there was a kind of hesitation in it, like they weren't sure whether to ask about what had happened or pretend they didn't know. Every July, I think about that night. I think about the 2 cracks in the year and how I didn't get up to check. I think about Carla's voice outside my window the next morning. I think about Frank's hands, always careful when he tuned the radio dials, and Laura's laugh when she handed you a jar of sauce like it was nothing. The sheriff's office still lists it as an open investigation. There's a short paragraph on their cold case page, a faded photo of Frank and Laura standing together in their yard. Every now and then, I'll see someone share it online, asking if anyone remembers that night. The comments fill up with the same questions, the same guesses. No answers. What unsettles me most is how quickly it happened. One moment they were in their kitchen, talking over coffee. The next, someone else was in their house, deciding what would happen next. And then they were gone, and the street felt different, like some invisible thread had been cut. People like to think they'd recognize danger coming, that there'd be signs. But sometimes it's just a car idling outside on a warm night, and by the time you notice, the door is already open.